Football Manager is a game where there's a lot to it. Not everything is simple and not everything is obvious. But today I'm going to try and help you with that by focusing on 5 things that you're likely doing wrong, even if you're an experienced player of Football Manager. Some of these are things that you can literally tweak instantly. Some of them are more about ways that you're doing stuff. But either way, hopefully with today's video, this will make you a better Football Manager player and hopefully give you a better chance of winning in your game. Now our tips today will go from everything from tactics to scouting, and I'll be doing all of it within this Juventus save that I'll use as an example. But don't worry, if you're in a save with a big club like this in Juventus, or you're managing a team in the 5th tier of English football, either way, all these tips will still apply. I want you to let me know in the comments how many of these 5 mistakes you were making. If you weren't making any of them, then congratulations, you're a Football Manager expert. Don't forget to hit the like button if you find it useful too, and subscribe for more. But with that being said, let's get into mistake number 1. And the first one we're going to cover is a little bit conceptual, so you'll have to stick with me here. It's not as simple as press this button, suddenly you'll win games. No, this is more about the way that people perceive players in Football Manager, and more particularly perceive certain attributes. So as we know, when you look at a player, you see someone with high strength and you know they're strong. You see someone with pace and you know they're going to be quick in the match engine. But there's some attributes that I think some people are looking at and almost presuming it's a negative one, and in particular I want to focus on aggression. Now, a lot of people seem to think a high aggression attribute is actually a bad thing and it means you're going to get more yellow and red cards, but that isn't necessarily true. It can be a byproduct of high aggression combined with other attributes, but it isn't immediately bad to have an aggressive player. In fact, you can do this with any attribute, but if you highlight aggression, you'll get a description from the game about what aggression is in Football Manager, and if you do this with most attributes, you'll probably realise there's a fair few that you didn't actually understand the meaning of. For example, it does say here it's nothing to do with a player's dirtiness. A lot of people think if you've got an aggressive player, they're a dirty player. In Football Manager, dirtiness is a whole different attribute hidden under the hood that every player has, but actually in Federico Gatti's case here, yes, he has high aggression, but that just means that he's going to get stuck in a little bit more and make more challenges. Does it mean that they're going to be wrong? Not at all. He could win the ball all the time, and that's why you have to think about aggression in a different way amongst many other attributes, one of which we'll cover in a second. But high aggression isn't a bad thing. In fact, a player with high aggression and high tackling means you've got someone that is going to go in for a tackle very often because of that high aggression, and actually in the tackle is likely to win the ball cleanly. So Gatti here, actually having high aggression and high tackling, means he's going to be winning the ball most of the time, and actually that high aggression is a good thing, and he might be winning challenges where other players might not have even gone in for it. So don't automatically assume that just because someone's got high aggression it's a bad thing. If they had 20 aggression but 3 tackling, yeah, maybe you want to worry a little bit, but you also need to factor in something like decision making. That determines a player's decisions both with and without the ball, whether they make the right choice. So with only having 12 decision making, maybe he goes to ground a little bit more often than he should, but just saying that a player's got high aggression means he's going to get booked more and he's not the kind of player you want isn't the way to look at it. The same way a lot of people see bravery, you'd assume you want a really brave defender in your defense, but actually if you read bravery, it determines how often a player is putting themselves into risky situations where they may get injured. Now that doesn't seem like a good thing out and out. In the same way, it's not necessarily terrible because it might mean that they'll make them challenges that other players won't make, but actually I'd probably have a player with high aggression over a player with high bravery, but automatically looking at these attributes, you might not see it that way, and you might have a different perception of how they work. So do keep that in mind. Just with all attributes, don't automatically assume something is bad. Take a look at all the attributes, make sure you're seeing them in context. In fact, I suggest for every attribute, just spend 10 minutes the next time you're on Football Manager, just having a read of what each one does. It won't even take you 10 minutes, and there'll probably be quite a few where you realise you had the wrong impression of them the whole time. Moving on to mistake number 2 that you might be making, and this is one that really bugs me, and because I do so many rebuilds every single week, I rebuild a club over 5 years on my channel, I see the negative effects of this all the time in myself if I ever catch myself not doing it. So don't worry, I make these mistakes too, but so often I see people focusing on their squad and their squad planning almost on a 1 year at a time basis when it comes to contracts of their own players. You might be planning out, 3 transfer windows ahead in terms of, I want this wonder kid in a few years' time, but loads of people look at their own team on a 1 year basis. So what I mean by this is, personally I do this, and I know a lot of people do as well, is when you're looking at your squad, you might be looking at which players' contracts expire next year. Now in this save, I think I've actually done a pretty good job of it, but here, it's 2027, and we're now going in to the final year in 3 players' contracts here. Now, a lot of people will just be actioning those three, deciding whether they want to sell or keep Kenan Yildiz, the same for Fatih Kanti, and Coat Miners here. So you're kind of making your decision as your players get to the last year of their deal. But I always say you should stay 2 years ahead at a minimum, really, when planning out your squad. So for me, actually, at the end of 2027 here, as we begin our 2027 to 2028 season, I'm actually going to be looking at these people with the 2029 contracts as well and already deciding if they have a long-term future at the club. So Dusan, of course, is someone that I might want to extend the contract of, Samuel Lino too. So I want to start getting the ball rolling on new contracts, on moving them away for a bunch of reasons. The first one, let's talk about the players you want to retain. You want to get them contracts in early because so often, particularly if you're not a big club, you'll have a player that gets to the last year of their deal and just as you want to negotiate, they say to you, I want to keep my options open at the end of my contract, I don't want to sign a new deal, and then you have to sell them at a cut price or you lose them as a free agent. Whereas if you dealt with that the year before and had 2 years ahead of you, you might have been able to sneak that contract in for another 5 years or whatever and get it over the line, or at least if you knew that player was going to leave at that point, you could start planning way ahead and selling him when he's got 2 years left on his deal as opposed to now when he's only going to have 12 months or whatever it might be. And that's happened to me before with RB Leipzig. Xavi Simons had a year left on his deal by the time I tried to negotiate. He didn't want to be there anymore and we ended up losing him for free and he went to Barcelona and was valued at 250 million. So it just shows you can make big errors even at pretty large clubs. You really need to be careful of this. And on the same note as well, if you decide that you want to sell, let's say Federico Gatti with 2 years left on his deal, now is the time to do it. Don't wait until he's in the last year of his contract before you decide to move him on or keep, because by then he's probably going to have lost half his transfer value. If I sell Gatti now, I could get 40 to 50 million. If I left his contract to go to its last year, I guarantee you I get nowhere near as much money for him. So make sure you're staying on top of your contracts, not just 1 year at a time, but 2 years at a time. So in this case, I've let Yildiz, Fatih Kanti and Coat Miners get to this point because I'm not sure if I want to continue with them or not, and you can be unsure, but for those ones that you really want to sign on, make sure it's done. So now Yildiz, I will go and give a new deal to, I think. Coat Miners, I might consider selling, age 30. He'll be after a big contract, so we've got some good young midfielders coming through. And Fatih Kanti, I wanted to see how he developed, but it didn't really get to much points. Now he's got 1 year left, maybe we will move him on. But I've considered the risks and I've let those players get to that point on purpose. The last thing you want is Dusan, your main striker, getting to the last year of his deal, you go down to sit down and offer him a mega package and you realise that he's decided he already wants to leave and you're going to lose him for free. It's the worst thing, so make sure you're staying at least 2 years ahead of your contract and squad planning. For the third thing I'm focusing on, this is a pretty quick and simple fix, but something that I need to point out because so many people are doing it and not realising why they're conceding so many goals. So this is actually a tactical thing I'm going to speak on. I'm not really any kind of tactic master. As you can see here, I'm using a very basic 4-2-3-1 gegenpress preset with Juventus with a few roles changed. In fact, in most of my saves, I'll use the presets from the game. I actually think they're pretty good. I don't always go 4-2-3-1, of course. I just felt like that suited what we had here at Juve. But this is something that I see so often. Out of possession, people go for a high defensive line or a much higher defensive line because they just assume that's the way they really want to play. And actually, in Football Manager, that does work really well. It is very good, but you have to have the right players to do it. But a lot of people are putting their tactic over their players first, and I think a lot of the time you need to at least find a balance of the two, or at least play the way that suits your players, because if you have a much higher line, as you can imagine, your line is going to be right up the pitch and it leaves a lot of space in behind for players to attack you. So you want to make sure that if you're leaving that big space, you've got someone to cover, you know, a Mickey van der Ven, that kind of thing, a pacey defender who can drop back and offer you a chance if you do play a higher line. So if I did that with Juve here, I've got Federico Gatti with 13 pace and 12 acceleration, not the quickest, and Malang Sarr, who's got 15 acceleration and 15 pace. That's pretty good actually, and I wouldn't be too opposed to playing a super high line at a dominant club like Juve with a decently quick centre-back and some full-backs with a bit of pace as well. But what you'll see a lot of the time is people in the 5th tier of English football with, you know, 35-year-old English centre-backs they've picked up on a free with 6 pace, and they're trying to play a super high line. It probably will get you some good results here and there, but if you see yourself conceding a lot of goals on the breakaway, There's a reason why. You can certainly play a high line with the right kind of people, but having slow centre backs when you have that high line, it's going to cause you more issues and you might actually be getting benefits from playing the line that way. So just keep an eye on it. Make sure you've at least got some pace, or potentially even drop one of your defensive options onto a cover option so they're there to sweep up on the counter attack. It's just something to keep in mind. If you are playing a high line, please take a look at your centre backs. And whilst we are focusing on tactics, that leads us nicely onto mistake number 4, and this is probably the most common, even more so of experienced players than it is beginner players, and that is not having a plan B tactic. And what I mean by this, I've caught myself doing it many a time. This save doesn't really count because it's a rebuild where I only stick to one tactic. That's kind of the whole point. But when you're doing your saves in Football Manager, it's great to have a tactic that you're working towards and you want to play. Particularly if you're a dominant club, you might not want to change your tactic up all that much. But if you're a team that's, struggling for relegation, mid-table, whatever it might be, having a plan B tactic for those big games away from home, or just general away matches, or Europa League matches, Champions League matches, whatever is seen as the tougher games for you, having a backup tactic is super necessary for a bunch of reasons. The first one is, as I mentioned, to have some kind of alternative if you are looking to, maybe just focus a bit more defensively than you are attacking in some games. This is a very attacking tactic. It might make sense for me here to add a duplicate of what I've already done, but maybe just have a little bit more defensive focus. So my box-to-box now could be partnered by a deep line playmaker on the defense duty. Maybe Kalulu on this side can go back to a wing back on defense, whatever it might be. I'm not saying this is anything crazy tactically, but just a little shift like that offers us another option to do. Of course, I think realistically, your second or third tactic should be something a little bit different, whether it's like a complete change in shape, going to a 4-3-3, whether you want to have, a gung-ho last-minute tactic when you're looking to score a goal, I don't know, whatever it might be. This is what I mean. You should have that second option ready to go, because if you try and spring that on your players mid-match, they won't have the familiarity, they won't have trained the tactic, whereas if it's something that they've been working on, they should easily be able to switch to it. In the same note, if I now clear this slot and we go and copy this tactic again, another reason that's great for having a backup tactic, it's about having one that's a little bit less intense on your players. So if you know by no doubts that you want to play this 4-2-3-1 style in these roles, and that's the football you're playing, you will not see anything else, well, maybe have one that's a little bit less intense for when you're winning 4-0, 75 minutes on the clock. Why are we going to go really hard and press if we're going to get, Kjærgaard injured for the season and ruin our chances? Have one that's just a little bit less tempo. You can see if you look at the intensity bar here, as we lower the tempo, the intensity does change. As you can see, it's just moved a little bit. So let's go for that. Maybe in transition, we're not going to rush it so much. We're just going to take it a little bit easier. We don't need the counter press. We might just want to hold on to the ball a little bit more. Maybe we want to go and add some time wasting, lower the tempo a bit more. Either way, by doing that, you can see we now have two tactics. One that's really intense. In fact, it tells you if you highlight it how intense requires high intensity, whereas this tactic only a moderate level of intensity, and we could maybe bring it down to balanced or something like that, lower the intensity a bit more. This could be your final 15-minute tactic when you're cruising the game. You might only use it 5, 6, 7 times a season in those easy matches when you're playing the rubbish teams, but it will help you. It will get you one less injury. It will keep your players fit and fresh a lot longer. You'll see that their condition won't go down anywhere near as much, and it's something that I really suggest you do, whether for tactical reasons or purely for fitness reasons. Have a backup tactic ready to go. And finally, for number 5, I'm just going to give this a bit of a broad term and then show you a few examples, but I feel like a lot of people just play Football Manager the way they always play it, and that is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying that is wrong in any sense, but sometimes I really do wish people would just kind of look around and check out the other parts of the game that they're maybe not clicking on. For example, we all know about scouting, we all know you can use this button and narrow down what you're looking for, etc, etc. But Football Manager isn't the most intuitive game and doesn't tell you everything that you need to do, so there's a lot of stuff that people are missing that they would have found if they clicked in certain areas, like, you can change your filters here, whatnot. People won't ever really click that. You can change this from all scouted players to players in your scouting center. I'm not saying you'd want to do that, but these kind of buttons are where you can find a lot of great little bits of information, one of which, the one I know so many people question and say, That exists, I never knew whenever I do this in a video, is this button here. You're looking at players that are interested in joining your team, 911 of them. That's because I've selected players with doubtful or more transfer interest. It doesn't mean just players that are doubtful about joining us, it's doubtful or more. And I have set that to this. In fact, for you guys, when you play Football Manager, it is not set to doubtful as default. In fact, I think most of the time it's set to slightly interested or interested. Let's say it was set to slightly interested or more. You'd be looking at a scouting list of 894 players from this current search that I've got right now. If I then search this to doubtful, it goes to 911. An extra 20 players now have just appeared as potential transfer options. In fact, the ones that have are the ones that are kind of worried about joining Juve. Maybe they think they're better than the club, and some of them are really top-level talents I wouldn't have even seen in my scout reports before because they weren't players that wanted to join the club according to this filter. So make sure when you are playing, you have this one ticked to doubtful. The same when you go players in range, you have to do it there as well. It won't do it for both when you click it. So go to doubtful or for loan, players that are doubtful for loan. It doesn't mean that they are doubtful of joining your club and that's it. It's doubtful or higher. So the ones that you're normally looking at will be interested or higher. You want to go to doubtful or higher because it just brings through a bunch more options for you. But a lot of people won't have seen that because why would you ever click on a little transfer cog here to find more players? You wouldn't really think so. Football Manager can be dodgy sometimes like that. But in the same way, there's buttons that a lot of people don't even know exist. Like the fact that you can click on someone like Guillermo Restes, a very good young goalkeeper. In fact, probably one of the world's best that we can't afford. Did you know if you wanted to find a player like that, but not him, you could go to comparison and find similar players and the game will bring through some similar options that fit the kind of attributes that Restes potentially has. Again, a sweeper keeper with all these attributes, you could knock it down to, 25 years old or less, and you find James Trafford and Marcus Vethusen, who isn't a player that I know, but now I can check him out and realise that, maybe he's good, maybe he's bad, but either way, it's given us a different option. The same way, if we found out we were losing our star striker and Dusan was leaving, we can click on him, go to comparison, find similar players, and get 18 options of people that could come in to replace him, one of which is playing for Lommel in the Jupiler Pro League in Jason Van Duyven, so now you could check him out, see if he's worth signing. Again, another button that many people did not know exists. The same for transfers. You look at the transfers tab, you maybe make offers for people, change your budgets. How many of you actually go to Director of Football, suggest transfer targets, pick a position on the pitch, and then select an actual role, and then ask your Director of Football to pick 3 players for that position for you? A bit of a questionable choice there from our Juve director, but Brennan Johnson, Francisco Trincao, maybe they'd be good options for us. Who knows? It's completely up to you. I'm not saying they give you good picks, but many people don't even know that this area of the game exists, and there's plenty of other sections like that in the game that I really just suggest you click on some things and check out. One that I absolutely love, go to the staff tab, go to responsibilities and hand away some of the responsibilities you don't want to do in game. Whether it's media duty, set pieces, actual in-match stuff, training, tactics, whatever it is, if you want to hand it over you can. And again, that kind of stuff is hidden away under the hood and most people won't even think to look there. Now of course there is no wrong way to play FM really, it's just however you like to play it, but with these 5 things, if you take a look at them, you might realise you're not doing these things in the best possible way, and if you change your methods, maybe you'll have more success. But there you go, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.